Welcome to Real Life in Real Estate. I'm Nikki Robbs, and I'm your local real estate agent serving Tacoma, Puyallup, and beyond. And today with me is David White from True Design Landscaping. And I've asked David to be on here because we haven't had a landscaper yet, and not all landscapers do the same thing. So welcome, David. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Tell us more, just tell us how you got into landscaping and why you're still in it.
Yeah, I know it's a bit of a tough job. It's very laborsome, and so I had worked for my old boss for about 5 years doing landscaping, and learned a lot of the trade and different aspects of landscaping. With that, we did a lot of maintenance. We did do installs and kind of like front yard, backyard renovations, stuff like that when those came up. But then honestly started the business out of necessity. We had come out of the kind of 2008, 2009 housing crash, and he had worked me every winter prior to this year. And I knew that eventually I wanted to start my own business, but this one winter we came to it, and he said he was going to have to lay me off. And it was like the first time, and actually ever, that I had worked for him that he was going to lay me off in winter. And usually we could stay fairly busy.
Yeah.
And so I filed for unemployment. It was like the first time in my life filing for unemployment. And when they came back to me and told me what I was going to be getting, I said, I can't pay my bills with this.
Yeah.
And so I decided to start my business then. And I felt like I can go drum up more work than what unemployment would pay me. And so it was very meager beginnings, simple beginnings. My father-in-law helped me make flyers, and I did a lot of door-to-door knocking. I had worked some door-to-door businesses prior to that, doing door-to-door sales, and so I wasn't too scared of that type of situation. And so I made up flyers, and I went into neighborhoods that I knew that they were ripe and well, good ground to be in, and they had need for landscapers. And so I went and knocked on doors, introduced myself, gave people flyers, and tried to line up as much work as I could. And so I had very little equipment. I don't think I had a truck even. I think I was pulling like a little trailer around with my Jeep Cherokee. And so it was very, very meager beginnings. But it was great. And it was a really great experience to start something from such small grounds and beginnings and grow it into where it is now. So
yeah. Because how long has it been?
13 years.
13 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And in that time, I got married. We've had 4 children.
Yeah.
We've bought a house. We've made tons of yard renovations to our own home. And lots of stuff in that 13 years. So it's been a very full 13 years.
Very full 13 years. So how many employees do you have now?
We have 6, and we're a fairly small company still, but we are wanting to grow and looking to expand. And so we're always looking for the right people. That's the key. Growing with the right people. People make or break you. It seems like, and a good employee can really do a great job and take a lot of weight off your shoulders. But bad employees can do the very opposite. So so we want to grow with the right people at the right time.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about what you do and why you're a different landscaper? Because I'm familiar with landscapers who come in and they will mow my lawn and they'll fertilize it and they'll do the basics of whatever I don't want to do. Or whatever, my kids are growing up and they're no longer helpful in the yard the way they used to be. They used to be my own personal labor force. And they're less so now. So that's what I would normally expect, but I hear you do something different.
Totally. So landscaping is a really multifaceted type of industry. And some people, some companies are going to stick more to like the maintenance side, which is what you're talking about. Just the ongoing maintenance, mowing, weeding, pruning, all the chemical treatments like fertilizer, maybe treatments in the beds, things of that nature. We actually do that. When I started the business, that was mostly what I knew. And so we we started a route and built a route of maintenance clients, and we still have many of those clients to this day. We service, mostly Pierce County, and we have a crew that all they do is they go through and do those types of things. But what really intrigued me about landscaping was the more creative part of it, and that's why I got into it. And I knew that eventually I wanted to get beyond just doing maintenance, to where we could actually be creative and do fun stuff. And so I wouldn't say we're totally abnormal. There are other companies that do the type of work that we do, but it's subjective, because landscaping is still, it's almost an art form. It's a very creative thing. And you're just using live plants and other materials to create this art piece that you're hopefully wanting to get in place. And so we do, from full design. So we'll go into yards that either don't have a yard at all. Like we do a lot of work in the Tahale neighborhood, that's up and coming. And there's a lot of need for landscapers there, because basically a person will purchase a home there and it has a front yard already done, but they have 6 months to design, install a backyard, from the time they get their keys to that time frame.
They're given a time frame.
They're given a time frame,
Wow.
and sometimes they can file for extensions and stuff, but there can be like penalties and some things that go along with that, because the HOA really wants to push that through and make sure that those backyards go in, because essentially when they get the keys to the home, the backyards, if it's a brand new build and it's never, it's like never been lived in before, then the backyards have not been installed. All it is you might have a small concrete patio back there and bark. I mean, literally, like that's
mud,
it. Mud,
filter,
bark. That's
rocks,
it. Yeah,
maybe,
exactly.
Whatever's left over.
And so at that point, a client gets a hold of us, and we've done several backyards up there, and those are really fun because they're not a lot of space back there. The yards aren't tremendously big, and so you have to be creative with what people want to do. It is kind of, I would say, somewhat of a retirement community. So it's either people that are close to retirement or they are retired moving in there, and so they don't necessarily need large yards. They're not entertaining tons of people or have kids that are needing a big backyard to play in per se, but they still want a functional backyard that they can enjoy. They can have family over, have grandkids over. A lot of them have dogs and whatnot, and so they want a place for their dogs to be able to run around, kids to run around and stuff, whatnot. So we do a lot back there, and that process is, getting a design in place, and then submitting it to the HOA. The HOA has strict guidelines for what can and can't be done in there, even certain amount of square footage for different types of materials. So something we do is hardscaping, and that is typically any kind of rock or concrete type of material that you're implementing into a landscape. So concrete pathways, patios, or paver pathways and patios, which we do a lot of, or even stamped concrete. Anything of that nature is considered hardscape. And so they have a certain threshold that we can't exceed in hardscape, because they want to maintain a certain amount of permeable surface back there, just so there isn't a ton of runoff between houses and flooding and those types of things.
So everyone with a small yard just paved the whole thing.
Paved the whole thing. Yeah, it was just concrete. Then you just have water that has no place to go, and it would massively. They do put drainage around all of the houses, but it would overwork those drainage systems for sure. And so usually, I want to say in Tahale, if I remember correctly, it's like a 50% hardscape threshold. And so, so beyond that 50% of hardscape, then we get into softscape, and that is plantings and things of that nature. So plantings, bark, those types of materials. And that's, again, probably a push that we want to, again, not just put hardscape surfaces in, but we actually implement living, breathing things that are going to create good oxygen, good impacts on the environment, so that we're not just going into these new developments and we're not just paving through them everywhere, and drastically reducing vegetation in those areas. So
yeah, that's super important.
Yeah.
So culture, you were telling me before we started recording that culture towards backyards has shifted a lot.
Yeah, I would say, at least when I was a kid, I didn't feel like there was as big of a push for entertaining per se in backyards. But I think that people, they maybe had more active jobs or jobs that they're outside more frequently, and so maybe they didn't necessarily see the need for it. But now that people work indoors a lot, they have a lot of office jobs, or we were talking about this also, but they're working remotely from home.
Yeah.
There's a push where they want to get outside, and I think that there's kind of a desire for them to be in the elements, to be outside, breathe in fresh air, see the blue sky, or sometimes hear the gray sky, but still enjoy being outside, and to not just be outside, but to have like a beautiful backdrop to enjoy with that. And so we feel like over the last 10, 15, 20 years especially, there's been kind of an emphasis on extending a person's house into their backyard to where their backyard is an extension of living space from the inside. And so they're not just doing all their entertaining inside and then saying, okay, kids, go play fetch or go play catch in the backyard. But they actually want to take the entertaining into the backyard. So we do a lot of just fun living spaces where it's a paver patio, with maybe like couches out there where people can gather, they can read a book, whatnot. We do a lot of fire pits because that's a really popular one, especially like for our family. We have a fire pit and we use the heck out of it. We love that thing. Our kids really enjoy it. It's a great time for our family to come together, roast marshmallows, hot dogs, other things too. We do these things, pudgy pie
okay, explain
makers.
that. What's that?
Okay, so we didn't know about them, but our neighbors told us about them, and they're like a cast iron skillet essentially that on a big metal stick, and you can do pudgy pies in them. Pudgy pies are you take like white bread, like just that run-of-the-mill cheap Wonder Bread, and you basically fill that thing, you kind of smash it down so it's really thin, almost create like a tortilla out of it, and put it in place, and then you fill it with whatever makings you want.
Yes.
And so like we've done s'mores in them. So like we do the makings of s'mores, we just break up graham crackers and chocolate and marshmallows and put them in there. You can do pie fillings in them. So you could do like apple pie filling or cherry pie filling in those. Our neighbors, they like to do one where they do like, I think it was like goat cheese and apple.
Oh my gosh.
But then you can do sauces on it, and then typically you put butter around, under the bread, between the bread and the cast iron, so that it kind of crisps it when you're cooking it. But then you just throw you put everything into the skillet. And then you put it into the fire and let it cook. And you kind of got to flip it. But our family likes doing those. Those are really fun.
I grew up with those.
Yeah. So
we called them clampers.
Yeah.
Clamps.
Yeah. Totally.
Okay, where do you get these things? Because people are going to want to know.
Okay, so you can get them a lot of places, but I will say our neighbors steered us in the right direction when we did it, because they said you can get them from Walmart and all this stuff. But the problem is that, especially when you're introducing heat to something, you want to make sure it's a good quality. Yeah. And they said that they had some that they encountered that they had kind of a metallic or even a chemical taste to them. Oh, no. And so they told us to go through like Cabela's or Bass Pro, just because the the cast iron that they use is better quality. And so we skipped going through the cheap ones and went to the ones from Bass Pro, and that's where we got ours. I think you can get them from many different places. Anyone that sells camp gear and stuff like that. And so, it's
very accessible tool to add
very
to your
accessible
backyard
tool,
right now.
yeah, and a great staple for fire pits for sure.
I love that.
And our kids, like I was telling you before, but we have kids 10, 8, 5, and 3, so they're very young, very active, and they're really enjoy these life experiences. And so it is a great thing to add to your arsenal for things to do as a family and enjoy while you're around the fire pit. So
totally agree. Yeah. We love the fire pit because it gets everyone together with nothing to look at.
Totally. Yeah.
And our fire pit is away from the house, so the Wi-Fi is really bad.
Yeah.
So it's like you're out here, we're just staring at the fire, some chit chat, some talk, some oh, there's a squirrel. Oh, look at the stars, and it's really an unwinding time.
Totally.
And anyone is welcome to join or not. It's just my kids are much older, and so if they choose not to join, it's fine, no big deal.
Totally.
And I don't have to worry about anyone falling in the fire anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we do have to think about that. Fortunately, our fire pit's fairly tall, and so it definitely it discourages that, but at the same time, we have a 3-year-old that's pretty active, and that's that could be.
And he's fast.
And he's fast. He's fast. Yeah. As you know.
I've chased him a few times.
Yes. Yeah. But that actually brings me to another point, is that I think that, and even in our house, I feel like that this is the case, but sometimes the indoors is associated with like technology. And so like for us, we have a TV in the living room, right? And in our formal living room, we don't, but and then even in our master bedroom, we have a TV. And I think that there's a part of people wanting to get outside that helps them disconnect from technology in that way. Because I think it's come out now that sitting in front of a screen, both for adults and for kids, is not, especially at great lengths, is not great for us. Yeah. And so I think that it helps like disconnect from that by getting outside, where it somewhat forces you into another area of your space. But that technology hasn't necessarily taken over. Yeah. And so, and it does bring in those elements of family time and kind of traditional conversation that we've somewhat as a culture gotten away from, just because screens are so popular now. Yeah. And so that's I think that plays a big part in this push for people to want to get outside and enjoy those spaces. So.
Yeah. Totally agree. So you are probably very experienced in how can we make the outdoors homey. Yeah. What are people looking for right now as far as, I need to create more outdoor living space? Yeah. Is it the trend toward deck, toward patio, covered areas? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think that covered areas, especially in our environment here, because we get hot summers and we do get the sun, but then we have,
contrary to popular belief, we get a lot of sun. We get a lot of sun,
and that we'll get into this later, but the need for irrigation here, and so so pergolas or some sort of covered space is popular here. Something that's going to at least shade a space somewhat when you're sitting under it, so that people aren't just taking in all this sun against a concrete paver space. And so that's been really popular. Just having these spaces where you can have several people sit out there. So just basic tables and chairs with, like I said, with a covered space over that. Is very popular. We do some things that are really fun where we can create seating walls they're not just like a wall, like a retaining wall that you'd see like plants behind, but these are actually walls built that are freestanding, but they can encase spaces either partially or fully to where people can come and sit on these walls that are maybe like 2 feet tall or so. And so, but again, we're always wanting to create functional spaces that people are going to use. So like when I go in to talk to a homeowner about a space for a consultation, one of the first things, if not the first thing I ask them is, what do you want to use the space for?
Yeah.
Because we want to create functionality for you in that space. Like it doesn't matter. Like if you don't entertain 50 people at a time, then we don't want to build a yard that's gonna be based on entertaining 50 people at a time. If you're more like, no, I want a small entertainment space, but I still want a space to go play catch with my son. He plays baseball or he plays football or whatever, and we still need a space for that.
Yeah.
Well, then we want to keep that in mind and create spaces for all of your events that you're going to have, all your activities that you're going to do throughout your week, throughout your year.
Yeah.
And so that's like the first and foremost is build something that's specific to your needs. And that's the I would say that's the really fun part about what we do is we get to go in and customize backyards to people's needs and create something that is functional for them.
Yeah.
And so and that is something we encounter a lot still, where people have had a yard in for like the last 20, 30 years. We meet this with older couples that are in their 60s, 70s, and they're like, man, we've had this yard in here and it's just looked this way the whole time. And it's never really been useful for us. We've always had like at least certain elements of it got in the way. They're like, oh, we've had this planter bed in the way with this huge rhododendron or whatever. And it's always gotten in our way. And so going in and being able to even just remodel, we call it remodel, but remodel a person's backyard. Maybe we're not starting from scratch, but we go in and we either gut the whole thing and we start from scratch, or we just take out certain elements of it and introduce new elements to it, or just create, kind of like you would with an older home and you want to create lots of space. You go in and you start knocking out walls, kind of same thing. We start doing some of those same types of things to just open it up, create space where they want it. And so those are also really fun because you can go into a place that has had a landscape established for many, many years, sometimes 50, 60, 70 years. And it's the same grass has been in there for that time and same rhododendrons because, 40, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it seemed like the only plant that people knew how to plant was rhododendrons and, those and junipers. I can't tell you how many times we've pulled junipers out of places. It seemed back in the 80s that's all they knew how to plant, was junipers. And so you just see hedges and rows of junipers.
Local.
They're local. They do
hardy.
Well. They're hardy. They do well in our environment.
Very hard to kill.
Very hard to kill. And when they're established, very hard to pull out. Not fun because I don't know if you knew this, but they have an acid in their vegetation, the foliage. So when you brush up against it, it irritates your skin. It's not going to do any permanent damage or anything, but it does. If you touch your bare skin, you're gonna agitate it, and you're gonna create irritation there. That's gonna last probably a day or two.
Yes,
and
my parents had a huge juniper near the front of the yard. We lost a lot of balls.
Totally,
and we only went after it once or twice, and they're like, nope.
Yeah, you don't want it. You learn your lesson. They have like a built-in, defense mechanism.
Really do. You're never getting that back.
Humans wanting to get in there, or probably anything.
Yeah. The deer won't eat it.
Yeah, totally. The deer can eat it. It's so acidic. And so I guess for that, they're fairly deer resistant. So they do come with some. And there's actually, in growing and landscaping and knowledge and whatnot, I have learned that there are actually certain varieties that are in the juniper family that I actually really love and are useful and don't necessarily have the same attributes as some of these run-of-the-mill junipers that we've seen.
So don't eat your toys.
Yeah, because we've had that conversation where I introduced like one type of plant that we like is called a blue star juniper. And so just having that name juniper tagged at the end, it kind of gives people a little bit of they brace for impact, like, oh, I don't really like that, And I have to explain to them, okay, this is not like the junipers you've probably experienced in the past. This one stays small, compact. It has this bluish color to it, which is really fun to introduce into landscapes. Just because if we can introduce different colors, textures, especially in an evergreen type plant like the blue star juniper, it just helps add color and it helps add stability to the landscape even in the winter times when maybe you don't have a lot of perennials that are blooming at that time, but you still want structure in there, so it doesn't feel like in the winter your landscape just goes completely, dead, sticky, type beds. So
Yeah.
So I don't know where we were going with that. Or I got into a lot of rabbit trails on that one. We'll have to cut that out. But yeah. So going back to kind of where we were at. So just outdoor spaces. People even want to, you'll see on HGTV and some of those networks a push for like outdoor kitchens and things like that. Because again, I think people really enjoy being outside. They like breathing in fresh air and doing as much outside and enjoying that weather as they can. Especially, I would say, some people say really here in the Northwest, and I'd say almost more so. Because we want the 3 or 4 months that we do get that's really nice. We want to capture as much of that time as we can. So like our family,
we're just never in the house.
I
don't want to be in the house.
In June, July, August, and even early September, we try to be outside as much as we can. So we eat inside the house maybe once or twice a week for dinner as a family in the summertime. Most of our time we have a fairly large table out on our back deck, and if we have company over, then we extend it with other tables and stuff. But we eat so much outside. We love barbecuing. We love the Traeger. So we smoke a lot of meats, do a lot of some veggies, all that stuff. And so we love being outside. And so we want to capture as much of that time as we can. And I think that's fairly common, that people want to capture as much of that time outside as they can during the good months that we do have.
Plus our winters aren't that severe. And so we have a covered patio, and we can have the Blackstone and the Traeger and everything cooking outside. And because our winter isn't that bad, if you just add a few comfort elements like a heater and maybe a gas fire, like you can be out there while you're cooking in January. Not a big deal.
Oh, we barbecue year round.
Yeah.
And we smoke meats on the Traeger year round.
And it's not go check on it and run back inside like in Eastern Washington where it's really cold. Because you have to. You can't just stand out there. But we can hang out outside as long as it's covered.
Yeah, totally. Like last week we were having mid-50s, 60 degree weather.
Fantastic.
And it was sunny. Felt like a heat wave when we've been in the 40s. And so, it was really great to be outside. And even our kids were running around. They're like, I'm so hot. I'm like,
oh my gosh, right?
This was like end of February, I think. And I'm like, guys, you can't complain about it being so warm. Like, it's only 60. Like, just get out and enjoy it.
Right, but pretty soon they're going to start asking for the water guns and sprinklers.
Totally.
And like, can we get in the pool? No.
Absolutely.
Not even 60. Oh, not getting in the pool.
I think my daughter brought that up last week. Was like, why hasn't Dad cleaned the pool yet? It's
It's so hot.
It's so hot, and
57.
I'm like, you wouldn't enjoy getting into that water. It's still cold. It might feel hot to you right now, but if you get in that water, the water is very cold still.
So because we have mild winters, but we do have some amazing summers, then irrigation is an issue that we can't sleep on.
Totally. No, not at all. I think that's another thing we've run into for years and always heard that. Well, it rains so much here. And anybody that's like lived here for a while realizes that, yes, we get a lot of rain, but we go through a season of drought, basically from probably mid-June, sometimes late June, all the way through July, August, and usually we don't start getting rain until mid-September. And there's been occasions over the last few years where we had 80-degree weather in October and still hadn't seen like rain until like late October.
Yeah, not significant rain. It was like,
it might be enough.
Surprise, you should probably wear shoes today. But
exactly. But not enough, not a substantial enough to amount of rain to actually get good root saturation for plants. And so irrigation is super important for lawns. So if you're going to grow a traditional lawn, I think it's personally 100% necessary, just because I've been in the industry long enough and I've seen what happens when people have irrigation and when people don't have irrigation. And people that go in with the attitude, and I get it, they're wanting to save money or the hassle of whatever. They don't want to install an irrigation system. They won't put one in. And with the best intentions of, I'm going to water it regularly and keep it alive and all this stuff. And the reality is that you might lay brand new sod for them, and then you drive by it a year later and the lawn looks really terrible, because the effort of how much you have to water our lawns here in the summer to keep them green is a lot. I mean, it is every day, especially in August.
There's so many people with the school of thought of let it go during the summer. It's hibernating.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but it depends on the type of grass.
Okay.
Okay. So we have native grasses like poa and bent grass and some other grasses here that are native to the area, and they do really well in the drought for the most part. Some summers they can have a hard time and they cannot bounce back, but for the most part they can go dormant in the summer, and then they can bounce back in the fall and kind of revive in the winter, and then be really healthy in the spring, especially if you're fertilizing and doing some of those things to help it come along a bit. But if you're putting down any seed from almost anywhere, Home Depot, we use a local supplier for sod and seed called JB Sod. They're a local grower that their farm is in Redmond. They have acres and acres of growing sod, and then they also produce seed. Those are northern grasses that they grow up there, perennial rise, fescues, things of that nature. But those don't go dormant in the summer as well.
Okay.
They might have a little bit of, what's the word? They might bounce back okay, but for the most part, if you don't water those types of grasses in the summer, they do not bounce back in the fall.
Okay.
And so if you put brand new sod down in a place, or you hydro seed a place, or put even bagged seed, we call it bag seed, but just seed that comes in big giant bags, and you seed it. If going into that, especially that first summer, if you're not watering it regularly, whether it's manually with sprinkler systems that you have to run hoses to, or if it's by a sprinkler system that you've had installed, it's not going to weather well. That they will likely die out. They're not meant, especially that first year. They haven't had good root development. They just can't last through that summer. So, and for us, we can't get sod in with native grasses grown here.
Really?
Yeah, and so just because there's no farms in the area that really do that, and so you can get seed. Like poa seed and bent grass seed, you can get that seed, but it's really expensive actually. Even though I know it seems counterintuitive, but it is native grass. But it's just because it's a very specialized grass, and so to actually produce it, there isn't a huge need for it. And so when they do produce it, it comes with a fairly large ticket with it. So.
Wow.
So that being said, and I would say you probably won't see that in Home Depot, Lowe's, and your traditional like suppliers for seed. And so you can go that route, but again, even that first summer, it's got to be watered really, really regularly.
Okay.
The only places that we really see it commonly used, like poa and that bent grass and some of these other grasses, are golf courses. And they use it for the greens because they're really good grasses to grow in dense, short type of growth. And so when you're wanting to mow a lawn really, really short,
Mm-hmm.
then it's a really great grass to use. Bent grass, they call it bent grass because when it grows, after it gets to a certain height, it starts bending over and almost growing horizontally, basically. And so it actually needs to be grown and kept really short.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it actually becomes kind of a problem. And so, and
I
like,
think I have some of that.
yeah, it's very common. And I've told this for years to people that if you're to go in and resod your yard, you're likely in 10 years, you're going to see almost all that sod, the sod grasses that you installed
Yeah.
gone. And you'll see it taken over by our native grasses here, just
Okay.
because they're typically more dominant than the fescues and rye that you see in the sod. And once they're in, they just kind of take over and they kind of spread. And so, and again, they're not bad grasses, but they do have to be maintained properly. Otherwise, it starts folding over, and you get the weird spots in your lawn and patches that don't look right.
Yeah, and then
so,
one time we raked and it came up.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
We just mowed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. And that happens. And some of it's like carpet grass is the same thing. And so, but yeah, irrigation is super important for lawns. It's also when we do a lot of softscape planting, and so we'll design a yard not just with hardscape and irrigation in mind, but with also the types of plants we want to put in. And so putting in those plants, you're taking them out of a pot, either 1 gallon or maybe 5 gallons, or sometimes a little bit bigger, and their root structure has only had that ability to grow, right?
Yeah.
And then you're putting it into a wide open space for it to finally flourish and grow. And so, but it's only still for quite some time, it's only absorbing water in this amount of space because its root structure hasn't had a chance to sprawl out. And so irrigation for those new plantings is also super important to get them going, especially going through that summertime to keep those plants alive, healthy, so that they can establish good roots. And then typically we see that you can start maybe not cutting off irrigation completely, but you can back off from that irrigation to where you're not watering as often or as deeply. That second, third, fourth year after that plant has had a chance to establish its roots and kind of make its home. So, yeah. But yeah, so irrigation is super important, and there's always growth in the irrigation field. So irrigation now compared to what it was 30, 40, 50 years ago is vastly different. Technology has pushed it, and just because of the need of needing to use less water and be more efficient with our water. So technology has pushed things forward to where we're able to optimize the amount of water that we're using to get the most out of it by both broadcast spray, which are the traditional sprinkler heads that you'd see that, they open up, and they're what we use for lawns typically. But now there's a big push for drip irrigation in beds to water plants. And drip is a really great option. There's little maintenance with it. And it's something that we can run to each plant and isolate where water is going so that it's only watering around those plants rather than a broadcast spray that's spraying the entire bed. And with that comes a couple benefits. I would say one is that you're using far less water, and you're actually your impact with that water is much greater because you're isolating it to each plant, right? But also, you don't get nearly the amount of weeds and other maintenance issues.
Because otherwise I'm watering the weeds.
You're watering
just as much.
all the open areas that don't have plants in them, right? In between, plants or whatever, the big open spaces. And when you water those, it traditionally will just create weeds, right? Because weeds just kind of blow in, the seeds blow in.
More weeding to do.
Then you have more weeding. And so we found that maintenance in those bed areas becomes far less when you're able to isolate it with drip irrigation like that. So, yeah.
Well, now I'm a big fan.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm a huge not fan of weeding.
Yeah, totally. No one is, right? And I think we were talking about that earlier too, but that's maybe the biggest thing or the most common thing we hear from clients, especially in that consultation process, is low maintenance. They'll always say, or no maintenance, which I would say
There's no
especially
such
in the
thing as
Pacific
no
Northwest,
maintenance.
is nearly impossible unless, again, you just go through and pave everything. But
Yeah.
even then, we've seen weeds grow in concrete, in the cracks and in the joints of concrete,
Yeah.
because weeds seem to need very little to grow. You want a lawn to grow and you got to water it regularly, but man,
Right.
weeds, it's like you don't try to do anything for it and they just grow rapidly. But
Yeah.
so I would say no maintenance is like an impossibility. But low maintenance is achievable. And that's kind of a varying subject, because what is low maintenance, right? Sometimes for people, low maintenance means they actually want lots of lawn and very little bed space, or maybe no bed space because it's easy for them to just pull a mower out and go and mow it. They don't have to bend over and weed. They don't have to prune anything.
True.
They don't have to do any of that, right?
Yeah.
And then some people, they don't like the idea of just a lawn, just pure lawn in their backyard or their front yard. And so we might do artificial turf with planting areas. That's another great way to create low maintenance, but still have that soft scape feel of grass back there. I will say I've grown up in the Puyallup area, lived in this area my whole life. I was born at Good Sam. Like, I love the grasses that we grow here, the native grasses. Like, we have great northern grasses that you can walk in barefoot, and I've been doing that my whole life. I used to run around the yard barefoot all the time. And love it. And you go to other areas of the country and it's not that way. You go to California or even the South.
I hate Bermuda grass.
Yeah, Bermuda. Some of those. There's one over there called centipede grass. And they're really like almost like a straw, like sticky, like straw.
And
like you do
sharp.
not want to walk around on it barefoot, right? But they're hardier. They can handle some of the heat that they get in those areas. And so I had a really hard time being swayed over to artificial turf for a long time. But I will say they have, there's so much competition in the artificial turf industry now that they have really pushed each other to grow and get better and create really great products.
Oh, that's
and
good.
So you'll say artificial turf, and people will think, and this is what I used to think too, but they'll think, the football field that they would practice on in high school or play games on or whatever, and they think of turf in that way, right? The turf that we install is a far cry from that. We want to install things that look fairly natural, are pet resistant, right? Can handle the potting from pets and all that stuff. And they've achieved that, and they've done a really good job. The industry overall has done a good job of creating good products. And so there is a push for that, just because water seems to be becoming more scarce, more expensive, right? And so if you're not going to have a traditional lawn with actual grass, real grass, but you want that look, it's a really great option, especially as we trend going forward, water just becoming more and more expensive. It's a really great option. We've broken it out. And if you're planning on being in a place for 5 years or longer, typically the artificial turf pays for itself to have it in.
Oh, that's great.
And so just because the amount of watering and maintenance that you save for all that, and all just even there's other factors in it. You're going to have to regularly maintain that lawn and renovate it, because lawns here, they typically grow moss, they grow weeds in them, and then they have a thatch buildup that happens. And so typically you've got to go in and dethatch a lawn every 3-4 years. So you're spending money on that, right? Either to do it yourself, which is quite laborsome. I've done lots of those myself, and most homeowners don't want to do that. Or you put in artificial turf and you skip all that. And so we added all the costs of doing that, and basically 5, maybe 6 years on most places, it pays for itself.
Wow.
And so that is a big trend that's growing. Again, it's a great way to create softscape space. So if you don't want just pavers or concrete everywhere, or just pavers and plants, that's a great way to introduce it and have that in your landscape, but without creating any maintenance. So
that's fantastic. That's great to know, because I still run into the old stuff.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
Well, that looks terrible.
Yeah, totally. And part of that is like getting in touch with the proper or the right landscaper or company that can help you source those products, or they probably source like we do. We just source those automatically for a client when we're going to install them. And we have a few different vendors that we work with for artificial turf and other products too, like all of our hardscape materials. We work with several different vendors, just because sometimes you can't meet the needs of that client with just one vendor. And so it's nice having a couple different vendors in your pocket that you can call. And a lot of our vendors we've been working with for years and years. And so we have great relationships with them. And like even when COVID was happening, and sometimes it was really hard to get a hold of certain materials. Like there was just a backlog on stuff wasn't being manufactured or shipped in the amount of time that it typically would. Having those great relationships with those vendors was really helpful, because they would kind of bend over backwards for you, because they know that you're a consistent client of theirs and customer, and they would help get those things in line for you for jobs. So we had times where like we took on jobs that other companies weren't able to do because they weren't able to source the products, and we were able to do them because we actually were able to source those products for them. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So for everything that you do, when is the right time to call you and your company?
Yeah.
When is it too late?
Yeah. So I think, in my experience, calling before you think you need us is probably the better idea.
Okay.
Because I think that sometimes people don't realize how busy landscapers get just in general, whether they're a maintenance heavy company or a heavy install company like we are. I don't think people realize how long it takes for landscapers to get to you. You know, our schedule builds up quick. This is a very laborsome job, so we're not coming in and spending 2 minutes at your place, like delivering a bottle of water. Like, you know, like we're there for half an hour, maybe 2 hours or longer when it comes to maintenance. And when it comes to an install, we can be on a job for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And so it's easy to get backlogged on projects. And so I tell people, if you want us in the spring, you want to get a hold of us in January, February time.
Okay.
Because usually if you're trying to get a hold of us and you want us in and to get that landscape in by summer, you're a lot of times people are behind on the 8 ball, and then they have to wait and wait a little bit longer. So and that's, I would say, probably typical with most companies, if not all companies. If they're good and they're booked out in the spring, that's just the reality.
If someone wants, let's say they know there's a backyard wedding coming up and it'll be in late May or June, they should talk to you in September.
They should talk in September. It would be really great. But even realistically, January would be a really great time, because there's, especially depending on what the project entails, there's design process, and that process of just design can take, 3 weeks, a month, sometimes longer, depending on where our designer is with all our drawings. And so that's just, us, the consultation to getting an actual just drawing to you for that landscape. And then from that point, we have to schedule the work, pending approval of the design, and then we can schedule it. So, and then you're working with everybody's schedules, and then they might want time to think about the design for a while, right? And so if we get a design and a bid for that design to that client, they might take a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And so in that process, we've had other clients that have lined up and got on our books, right? And so I always tell people, if you want us in sooner, you got to get us answers sooner, right? And so we do our best to field all that work, but once we give it to the client, it's kind of up to them. And so and then there are certain projects where like we're going to be doing a project here in Stilcombe, and it's a brand new house being built, and then they need to have a yard installed, right? Well, they got a hold of us. We did the Tacoma Home and Garden Show a month ago, or a little over a month ago, and we met them there. And they mentioned wanting irrigation and some other things and I told them it would be great to get us out there before you think you need us and before you start putting concrete everywhere. Because for us, sometimes it's less expensive and easier for us to get certain pipe in place once before concrete gets poured. Because like they're gonna have a driveway poured and all that, and sometimes that can be troublesome for us when we go in. And now you've kind of landlocked yourself with this 30 or 40 foot wide slab of concrete that goes all the way from the street to the house, and it's now a place that you have to try to get irrigation through, right? And so they got us out there at the right time. And so we're going to be able to get out there and install a line that we can run all, we call it a sleeve, but it's basically a 4-inch PVC line that we're going to put in that will span the driveway, and it'll allow us to run irrigation, any wiring for low volt lighting. So we want to put lighting in there, and basically anything that they're going to need probably with their landscape over the next potential, 10, 20 years, it's going to be big enough that they can fit anything they want through there. And so, so sometimes getting a hold of us earlier will help save money, and make our life and the client's life easier. So,
Love that.
So I always think sooner the better. The
sooner the better. Awesome. Yay. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on? We covered a lot.
We did cover a ton. And as I told you before, I could probably ramble on for quite some time about things. I would say also with things, if you're thinking about a project in your backyard, another good reason to get a hold of us is for budgeting. So just like when you have a house built, you have to have drawings put together, right? An engineer have to sign off on it to make sure that it's a good drawing and everything's supported properly. And then you're actually going to get a cost on what that house is going to cost to build. We're the same way. And so some things we don't have to go through that process with, but if it's a full, like we want to design a backyard and install backyard, we're going to need to put a plan together. And then we'll give you an estimate for what that plan is going to cost, right? And so sometimes getting in touch with us earlier is better for that also. So you'd say, well, that is something that we can't afford this minute, but it is something that maybe we can plan for in 3 months or 6 months or whatever. And at least we know what the ticket price is on something like that, so that we can plan ahead. Because that's the other thing is sometimes landscaping can cost more than people think. And so, and we run into that every so often where people's expectations for what things would cost are much lower than what they realistically are.
I think it's pretty common that a lot of us still have 1995 prices in our head.
Totally.
I still think a burger is $3.
Yeah, totally.
Still think a cup of coffee should be about $3. And it's just
totally.
not.
Totally, especially after COVID, right? I mean, just lots of stuff increased from all the stuff that happened through COVID and inflation that we've been seeing over the last few years. And so I'm the same way. My wife will tell me when she goes to Costco what the cost was, and I'll say, what? And then she walks me through the bill, and I'm like, you're right, it's all the same stuff, but it's just things just cost more, and it's the same thing for us. Our materials that we use, and we use high quality products that have been used for years that are with well-established companies. And labor is not cheap anymore. The days of $10 an hour workers are way long past and over. Especially sometimes people don't think of what we do as being a skilled labor, but it really is. Like the types of stuff that we do required skilled laborers that know what they're doing. They know how to run the proper equipment, saws. We have heavy equipment that we use like excavators and skid steers and things of that nature. And those all require skilled people in place so that we're creating good products and we're turning over a really good product to our client. And so, but with that comes cost. You know, when you pay people well to do a good job, you pay for good products, it just costs money.
Yeah.
And so, again, just if people are mindful of that going forward, then they can plan ahead a little bit better. And we run into that where we have a consultation with someone, and we can sometimes give them a ballpark idea of what the cost is going to be, and they'll be like taken back a little bit and have a little bit of a sticker shock on it. And but then they might get another bid or two and realize that that's just where things are.
So
I mean,
true.
it's just realistically
Yes.
for what they want, that's just where things are, you know. And so that's, again, a good reason to get a hold of us sooner, is because we can have that conversation early on, and then you can plan better.
Totally.
So,
Totally agree. Awesome. Where's the best place to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so we're excited. We just launched a brand new website like a week ago, a little over a week ago. And that is the best way. You can scroll through our website, and it's built to direct you to our contact form.
Okay.
And the contact form will be something you fill out. So it'll give us your basic information, and then also gives you a spot to just click on the types of services you think you might need. And obviously, if someone doesn't click all the right services, that doesn't mean a whole lot, but it gives us an idea going into a consultation what we might be talking about, so we can just be better prepared, or we can maybe bring brochures for those types of products and whatnot. So that is the best way. Through that website, you can also give us a call. And contact us that way. Email is also a great way. If you fill out our contact form on our website, it's going to drop into our email box kind of the same. And so those are the best ways. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yay. Thank you so much for being on today.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for having me. This is a great experience.
A lot of people stuff to think about between what type of grass do I have?
Totally.
How am I watering? I don't even know how I'm watering this year. So
yeah, totally.
That was great. Thank you so much for being
here.
here.
Thanks for having me. It was awesome.
Oh, before we go, what areas do you serve?
Yeah, so we service all Pierce County, and then South King County, so basically like Auburn and South, and then Northern Thurston County. So just a little bit of that top part of Northern Thurston County area.
Northern Thurston, like Lacey, Olympia.
Lacey, Olympia. Olympia is probably where we would probably stop.
Draw the line.
Yeah, getting a little far from home for us.
Too much drive time.
Too much drive time eats money.
Totally.
But sometimes the need is there, and people they really want your company out there, and so we go out there and make it happen. It's fun. And it's fun to work in all those different areas too. So
totally agree.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. And if you need any landscape information, we will have all of David's contact information in the notes. You'll be able to find True Design Landscaping, no problem.
Awesome.
Yay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.